Well, first, we would like to, say thanks to the Sugar Bowl committee for having the Auburn Tigers and the city of New Orleans. It's always a treat in the education business to see guys experience something for the first time, and the looks on the faces of our guys when they realized they were coming to the Sugar Bowl, and the looks on their face when they got here. And even something that we take for granted when you bring 18 to 22-year-olds in the educational process and drive them over to practice, and they see the Superdome for the first time, and you're in the right business of teaching young men when you see guys experience and things like that. So we'd like to say thanks to the city and the committee for that. As far as the preparation, briefly on that, obviously we had pretty lengthy practice sessions back home, went very well. Practice has gone very good here. Everything appears to be that we're as healthy as we're going to be, which is pretty good considering some of the bumps and bruises we had along the way. I think this will be a great challenge for us. Obviously, the opponent is a very talented football team and well-coached conference champion, so we've got a great challenge there. The thing that I think is probably the biggest thing for our guys is that we just have to carry the process that we had in the season into the game, and then we'll go from there.
For Coach Steele.
Mark Murphy from Inside the Auburn Tigers. Could you talk about Oklahoma's big playability and the type of concern that is for your defense?
Well, I mean, anytime you play, you coach defensive football in college football or NFL football, it's got to worse than high school football. I mean, every game you watch now, the top gets knocked off the coverage frequently in games. That's just the design of offense now, with the hurry up, spread. Explosive plays are key to that. It's not something new. We see it in practice. We see it in teams we play in the SEC. But obviously, when you turn the film on with Oklahoma, with the quarterback and the receivers that they have, they certainly do well at knocking the top off of coverages, and so it's going to be a big challenge. But again, it goes back to the style of play that we're used to and what we're trying to prevent and what they're trying to make happen. So it's not anything that we hadn't seen. We see it every game. It's just sometimes that the guys that you're trying to prevent from doing it have some special talents. And I think that's the case this week.
Kevin, very trammeled with the Oklahoma. Before you became an SEC staple, you spent some time in our part of the country. What do you remember about Stillwater and Waco?
Well, you've got Lincoln, Nebraska. The longest tenure was, at that point in time, it confused me now. I've been doing this long enough that I remember when Nebraska was in the Big 12 and the Big 8. In fact, I think the total is 10 years in what is some Big 12, Big 8 years. It was a great time, great football, and I've been to Norman. I've been there as 3 different schools, so I experienced Norman, Oklahoma, and the type program it is and what it's like to play there. And obviously, in terms of just the Big 12, probably the biggest difference for me is I remember Big 12 being a whole lot colder on Saturdays than the Southeastern Conference is, because you go to Ames, Iowa, and Lincoln, Nebraska, and Boulder, Colorado, and even Stillwater, Oklahoma. I coached in the Ice Bowl, I guess that's what they call it, in '84 or '85. Some of the people covering this room right now was not born then, but I was actually there.
Philip Marshall, Auburn 247 Sports. Kevin, Carl Lawson, after going through a lot of adversity his first few years at Auburn, being hurt twice, gets through the year. How valuable has he been, not only what he's done on the field, but just his maturity and leadership and those things? How valuable have they been for you this year?
Well, it's been huge in terms of his leadership. I mean, Josh Hosley, Montravius Adams, Carl Lawson, those guys are really, Trey Matthews, really, really good leaders, and Carl being one of those guys. But Carl is not necessarily a vocal leader. He's a guy that just when you watch him on the practice field, he leads by example. And on Saturdays when he plays with a high motor. Of course, he's got an extreme skill set, and it allows you to do things as a caller when you can utilize somebody like that. You got to know who can do what, but you also need to know that who can keep things from happening. And Carl has the ability to help other people on the field because of what he can do.
Kevin's Jay Tate from AuburnSports.com. Tell me what you're going to miss most about having Crime Dog here, just kind of what he brought this year.
Well, Wesley McGriff, our secondary coach, is, for you that don't know it, I'm sure everybody in this room knows it, but we got some from the Big 12, has taken the defense coordinator's job at Ole Miss. And, of course, first of all, as a friend, that's somebody that I've known for a long time, I'm excited for him and the opportunity. So there's a positive there. We're happy about that, but really going to miss him. I mean, he's the consummate professional. He's great with the players, but probably the biggest thing, he is as good as a teacher in the back end as you will ever see. And one of the reasons that we have so few of deep balls. I mean, there's very, very few deep ball big plays against us this year. I mean, as few as I can ever remember being around. And I attribute that to the fact of how good a teacher he is of keeping the top on the coverage.
Hey, Kevin. Carl Prather, WFF TV in Huntsville. Discuss and tell us a little bit about Rudy Ford, what type of player, obviously, that he's been during his career at Auburn, and what type of guy he is off the field as well.
Well, I can't speak for his career. I can only speak for the year. But, Rudy is a classy young man, very smart young man. He's a guy that has a good spirit about him, but probably the biggest thing is Rudy is real fast, real fast, and he can because of the change of direction and speed burst that he has, it gives him the ability to do things that's hard and rare to do.
Yeah, Kevin, talk about your New Orleans practices with the young guys, how those went, and
Right.
Did you get a lot done?
Well, I wouldn't say we got a lot done because it was, it sounds like it was long practices. It was just periods of practices. But we practiced the young guys at the end and tried to get reps for guys that, Marlon Character, Nick Coe, and guys like that have redshirted, and give them some competitive reps. So it's almost utilized like a mini second spring practice, if you will. And, that's one of the great values of the bowl system that people don't realize is that, we're not like the NFL where we can take 6 months off. We had to develop players. And in developing players, you have to have them on the practice field to do that. And so, spring practice is not what it used to be. It seemed like when I was playing, it lasted forever. And now it's very limited in terms of the contact, the number of days you have. So the developmental player, to develop a player is a little bit more difficult. And the bowl time, the teams that get to go to the bowl teams have a distinct advantage in that regard.
Myron Patton, Fox 25 to you, Oklahoma City. Oklahoma obviously has a quarterback receiver combination, Heisman, finalists obviously are pretty good, but they've also got two running backs that are really good as well. Which do you want to take out first or control first?
Well, you can't approach it like that. When you got that much talent across the board, you take one out, and then most swords have two sides, and they can both cut you. And so you got to be real careful saying, well, we just take something out. They've got 11 guys, we've got 11 guys. We got to get lined up properly. We got to communicate properly. We got to have the right matchups on the right guys and be in the right gaps. We got to set the edges in the run game, tackle well with great pursuit, and keep the top on the coverage. Now, that was a pretty good dissertation. If we get all that done, we'll be okay. But they're talented, and they're going to work to try to make those things not happen. So, but you can't just say we're going to load up and they're not going to run the ball. Well, then they'll throw for 450. If you say, well, we're going to take away the throwing game and they're not going to beat us deep, we're going to have so many people deep they can't beat us deep, then the running backs will have 250 apiece. So you got to be able to do both, and that's just defensive football. I mean, it is what it is. And so, having said that, you know, when you watch their games, they've had in the games they've played, the 12 games they played, they've only scored under 34 points twice. And in those games, there's a whole bunch of yardage, and that yardage is coming in the throwing game and in the running game. In every one of those games, it's not lopsided in one game and non-existent in another. It's there. It shows up. So we're going to have to be able to do both. But that's defensive football in the Power 5 conferences now.
Chris Dabe with NOLA.com. Before you came to Auburn, you spent a year at LSU. I was curious what you thought about Ed Orgeron becoming the head coach after spending a year with him, and then also kind of what you took away from your experience at LSU.
Well, you know, LSU is a wonderful place to coach football. The players there are magnificent people. They work hard. Football, it means a great deal to them. They've got great fans. It's a great place to work. It really is. And so it was a great year there. In terms of Ed, you know, Ed and I worked together that year. It was unfortunate, and I think Ed would tell you this, the circumstances in which it came about and how it came about, but it did. And, you know, he's a guy that's got a lot of energy. He's a great leader, and he's an LSU-type guy. So I was very excited for him, and I think he'll do a great job. Again, on the flip side of that, like I said, Ed would tell you the same thing. It was sad in the way it happened because, you know, we both worked for less. And Coach Miles was a really, really good person, a good man, and won a lot of games there.
Time for one more question right here.
James Creppy with AL.com. Kevin, can you speak to the status of the search? It sounds like there's been an indication as to who the new defensive backs coach will be. And secondly, can you speak to just the challenge that the DBs are going to have with whoever the new coach is as a fifth position coach in 4 years at that position?
Well, let's start with the second part of that. I know that's good reading and material, you know, fifth, but remember, you're talking to the same group that, I mean, people graduate and transfer now like free agency in college football, and pro guys, you know, they sign 1-year contracts and be with one team. I've got a guy I coached in college that's in the NFL. He's with the third team by choice, contractually by choice, in the last 3 years. So we're a little different. This is not 1970 where every SEC head coach had been there 15 years. There's a lot of change in things now. Players change, coaches change. I think just as an American society, we're pretty good at change. And so I think that's way overrated. I think it's, you know, just it really doesn't mean a whole lot. If the guy coaching you is a good person, a good teacher, and knows what he's doing, the players will adapt. And so that's no concern at all. And then in terms of the search, you know my standard patent answer that y'all don't like at home, but that's a question for the head coach. But I will say, I know that he's already told you this part. We do have a list. There has been some contact. There has been no decision and will not be until we get back home.
Thank you, Coach.
All right, thank you.